Welcome to the eBSI Export Academy's International Trade Specialist Program. 42 video courses designed to boost your global trade skills. In this course, Intercultural Management, you'll discover how cultural differences shape business interactions, strategies for holding trust across cultures, and ways to avoid costly misunderstandings in international trade. Ready to go global? Let's begin. Intercultural management is one of the most important and difficult aspects of international marketing. The exporter negotiates with individuals from countries with very different cultures and habits. If the exporter does not adopt an open and respectful attitude towards these cultures, they will hardly achieve success in business. Exporters should attempt to learn the idiosyncrasies of each market. In this unit, we will learn about adapting our marketing approach to different markets. This will be achieved by examining how diversity of culture can influence the outcome of a marketing plan, outlining key strategies to dealing with new cultures, detailing major theories on the subject, and highlighting important errors to be avoided when dealing with different cultures. Idiosyncrasies of each market. A manufacturing company wishing to enter a targeted market is usually faced with evaluating the buying habits of a society with different cultural values to that of its own. To best achieve this, it should research the buying behavior of customers in the segment of the population with sufficient disposable income to merit being considered as a possible customer. Culture. Without doubt, one of the factors which differentiates one country from another is its culture. Every country has its own culture. To be successful in international markets, the exporter must get to know and respect this culture. We have seen before that the income per capita of a country influences the buying habits of customers. But just monitoring the information is not enough. We must go further and try to find the answer to the following question. How do social and cultural factors influence buying habits independent of the level of income in question? Every country needs an answer. The answer to this question will be quite similar for each country. This can be used to develop a global strategy. However, each country will exhibit some differences, and to achieve greater success, these differences must also be accommodated. Universal patterns. In his book, The Common Denominator of Culture, the anthropologist Murdoch established a list of universal cultural categories. Read through some of them below. In many cases, we can see that the form in which each is expressed may differ, but that the objective or use is the same. Is there a universal cultural pattern? A difficult question to answer. However, we can see certain common behavior patterns which exist in all cultures, at least in countries with similar income levels per capita. We can therefore design a marketing plan taking into account these universal patterns. Music. Music forms an important part of all the cultures in the world. Every country has its own indigenous music. However, modern music, such as the Beatles and Michael Jackson and Julio Iglesias, is also frequently listened to throughout the world. In all countries, music serves as a form of entertainment, a form of artistic expression, part of social occasions, and more. Music then offers a hook to hang an advertising campaign on. If global, use a globally accepted music. If local, use a locally accepted music. Music is therefore one of the universal cultural patterns that the marketing manager should take into consideration. An open mind. In order to understand the reality of each country, it is important to maintain an open mind and avoid the natural tendency to believe one's own culture is the best and so should be imposed on others. All cultures and all customs have a validity in their own settings. Nobody is absolutely right. Something acceptable in one culture may be a taboo in another, and vice versa. One must be understanding when encountering other lifestyles and customs. While one does not necessarily have to adapt to them, one should always respect them. This is a common failure with exporters, who often believe that their culture is superior. So, the importer should adapt themselves to that. This is a grave error, which should be avoided, and to do this, one must feel secure in one's own convictions and traditions while accepting of others. Cultural classification. Edward Hall divides cultures into two types, according to its context. High context culture. Here, context rather than content is of significance. Fewer legal documents are used in these cultures where one's word is one's bond, and this makes negotiations a lot slower. Low context culture. With clear and explicit messages in which written words transmit most of the information, legal documents are considered essential. Europe and the USA are examples of these cultures. Subcultures. However, one should never forget that in both types of culture there are subcultures. For example, in a low context culture, such as Europe, the central banks operate a high context culture. This is also true of the diamond sector. A further example is the Hispanic subculture of the United States, in which a high context culture exists. No need to be afraid. Aware of the pitfalls, one must eventually test the water, so one must eventually learn to deal with the culture of the target country. It would be impossible for an exporter to know all of the specific characteristics of each and every market in which they find themselves working, and here we can offer a little help. The exporter's worst enemy is without doubt adopting a rigid attitude. When an exporter travels to a country, we recommend that they dedicate a significant part of their time to socializing and on gaining advice from the greatest spectrum of opinion possible. While this might appear a waste of time, in our opinion it is important as it affords a real vision of the country's culture. About language. Culture can have a profound effect on language. A dramatic example can be found in the interpretation of a single word between the USA and, say, European English. Although language is the same, certain words can mean totally different things in each country. For example, an American might say, "She sat on her fanny doing nothing," while this to a European English-speaking person would be quite offensive, as the word fanny designates the female genitalia. So, the previous sentence could certainly lead to a linguistic faux pas. In Africa, one often hears the phrase "pas de problème," which literally means no problem. However, in the African context, through common usage, it is just a pleasantry, meaning nothing significant. Again, Africans find it almost impossible to say no, and often avoid so by answering something totally different.
Hi there. I really hope you're enjoying the course content. We worked hard to create a video version of our interactive course that's available on our online campus. If you're finding it of benefit, please like and subscribe. It'll help us spread the word to others who may be interested. We really appreciate your spending your time with us here. Thanks.
About language. The Japanese use yes in a different way since it can be used to negate a question. For example, "Do you want a cigarette?" "Yes, I don't smoke, thanks." Each word should be interpreted in its own context. Spanish and Latin Americans tend to introduce themselves with their full name. For example, "My name is Eva Martinez Hielo." In the United States, this can appear too formal, as they are usually using first names. However, in Japan, to use just John, for example, would represent a conflict with tradition. Some common errors. Not attempting to learn anything of the local language is to do some degree of an affront to the people you deal with. Do learn at least the greetings. With no knowledge of the local language, and English not spoken, we strongly recommend that you hire a good interpreter and above all that you establish a good relationship with them. On the other hand, it would be ridiculous to expect one to learn Tamashek, which is spoken by the Tuaregs in Niger, but again, a few words helps to ease communication. For example, Salam Alaikum. This is a common Arabic greeting and used by most Muslims when greeting each other. Some errors. Let's get straight to the point. An upfront approach, such as this, can be quite productive in countries such as the USA, yet quite offensive and counterproductive in countries in continents such as Africa and Asia. In these latter cultures, the person with whom we are dealing needs to have developed some kind of relationship or friendship with us before they will be willing to begin any kind of negotiation. This means that any transaction in these countries will require more time and dedication. We should take advantage of this time to get to know our counterpart, just as they will with us. Silence. This concept is valued differently in different cultures. It makes a European or American nervous, which makes them speak out of context or superfluously. On the other hand, to an Asian or an Arab person, silence implies meditation. It is a positive concept, and one should accept it as such and not break the magic of the silence. It's not necessary to keep constant chatter. You should take advantage of these silent periods to study your counterpart, think, and try to figure out what they are thinking. Aggression. Europeans and Americans tend to be very aggressive in their sales approaches. Monosyllables, such as yes and no, are used quite often. In other cultures, these are usually verbally qualified. One must argue one's point and answer in depth any questions. Some advice. People are really complex. It may be impossible to understand a person's nature, especially in a short time. Just accept this fact. Our perception of reality is very limited. Accept it just as it is and work within the limits it sets you. Don't consider something as being strange. If you don't understand it, then just accept it as it is. Theories. Maslow's theory. This well-known theory can aid us in our study of worldwide cultural patterns. Maslow established the hypothesis that the needs and desires of a person can be sorted into 5 categories. When the individual has first satisfied the physiological, security, and social needs, they will next satisfy the need for self-esteem. Satisfaction on this need causes a demand for products which improve one's social standing in society. This is achieved in different ways in different societies. The next higher level is that of self-realization. Once the needs of nutrition, security, friendship, and prestige are satisfied, this need becomes dominant. If at this stage the individual does not prosper or do what they feel they are skilled at, they will end up unhappy and restless. This theory is especially useful as its application is universal. A person in Ghana, in Honduras, or in Singapore will always try to fill the needs of nutrition, security, friendship, and prestige before filling those of self-realization. Although how they do so will differ from one society to another. This knowledge can be put to good use when segmenting a market, as it enables promotion of the product to key into aspirations. It is also useful as a method of evaluating agents' potential. We have provided 2 videos, one on Maslow's theory and one on an expanded hierarchy for your information. Hofstede's theory. It is based on the assumption that countries can be compared with each other by rating the following 5 parameters. 1. Power distance. This measures the level to which the least powerful in society accept that said power is unevenly distributed. 2. Individualism or collectivism. This measures the level to which a society groups together. In this way, we can have individualist cultures. Each individual worries about their own problems and about those of their immediate family, and collectivist cultures. The members of the group act jointly. 3. Masculinity and femininity. In the first case, it is expected that the man is competitive. He seeks success while the woman stays at home and looks after the family. In the case of femininity, a type of society is envisaged where the roles of the man and woman are mixed. Number 4. Uncertainty avoidance. This measures the level to which individuals in a society feel uncomfortable with situations that are abnormal or difficult to understand. The reaction to these situations may be either violent or reactionary, or passive and tolerant. This method of rating can be useful for categorizing Western countries. In other countries, one would also have to take into account other criteria, such as shame, order, and so on. Number 5 is long-term and short-term orientation. This measures the level to which the society can look to the long-term or short-term when making life decisions. Self-reference criterion. James A. Lee in 1966 used the term self-reference criterion, or SRC, to characterize unconscious reference to our own cultural values when examining other cultures. He suggested a 4-step approach to eliminate SRC. First of all, define the business problem or goal in home country, cultural traits, habits, or norms. Secondly, define the problems or goals in terms of the foreign culture, traits, habits, and norms. 3. Isolate the SRC influence in the problem and examine it carefully to see how it complicates the problem. 4. Finally, redefine the problem without the SRC influence and solve for the foreign market situation. This attempts to have us see how things really are, devoid of our own cultural influences, and it requires one to open up to new cultures, motivations, and behavior. Environmental sensitivity. This measures the level to which products should be adapted to meet the cultural needs of each country. In this way, we will encounter products which are insensitive to the environment, that is to say, they do not require any adaptation, for example, integrated circuits. Highly sensitive products will have to be adapted to each market, for example, consumer food products, because they are very sensitive to cultural and climatic conditions. Most products find themselves in between these two extremes. Rogers' diffusion of innovation theory. This theory, developed by Everard Rogers in 1967, tries to describe the process through which an individual adopts an idea. Rogers discovered a trend which he synthesized into 3 concepts. Firstly, the adoption process. Secondly, the characteristics of the innovations. And thirdly, categories of adopters. Key points. Personal relationships. We know that in general, Latin Americans like to be close to each other when they are talking business. We could almost say that they swapped breath. A businessman can get too close, however, in Western societies. Yet, if he moves away, he may cause problems in another very subtle way, because both he and his counterparty may feel uncomfortable. Personal relationships. In conversation, a Japanese will rarely say no to a proposal. His reason is to avoid loss of face by avoiding conflicts, preferring a less direct approach. While this to a Westerner may appear ridiculous, it is not, and instead stems from the values imbued as a child and as such must be accommodated. Infinite patience is a requirement when negotiating in Arab and African countries. The agent will first want to personally know you before doing business with you. Furthermore, you will have to know the common customs. For example, never offer your left hand to an Arab. Product names. One must pay special attention to the product name. A name can sound perfect in one market, but can be disastrous in another. Some examples. Mitsubishi have a 4x4 car in Japan called the Pajero. However, in Spain, its name was changed to Montero because the former has offensive connotations in Spanish. The candy bar Snickers had its name changed for the UK to marathon, because the former's similarity with the word knickers. The word knickers has fallen into disuse in colloquial language in recent years, and now the global name is Snickers once again. The popular Irish spirit, Irish Mist, had to have its name changed for the German-speaking market, where mist means manure. Volume of business done. We must analyze and improve the modus operandi of representatives. One way of doing this might be to check the average number of inquiries serviced per day and construct a form for daily completion, and, in light of history, set targets. Also worthy of attention is average duration of business phone calls, or again, sample calls to monitor content and so diplomatically offer constructive criticism to effect improvement. Every system of working includes a certain rhythm of negotiations, which must be respected. While it may appear awkward to us, nevertheless, it is probably us who have to adapt to this circumstance. Pushing a local buyer who is used to taking a lot of time to deliberate to buy a product may be counterproductive and drive him back to his comfort zone where he bought from the competition. Remember, to change his supplier has exposed him to possible ridicule and risk. So, at the end of the day, it is the buyer who imposes the speed of the transaction. Again, if the buyer likes quick responses, his demands will have to be met. Established competitors. Established competitors, if approached properly, are a great source of information. In some societies, the competitor is seen as the enemy in business terms. So, the attitude in a professional meeting is to protect all information. On the other hand, well-established competitors, being secure in the market, are often approachable to exchange ideas. Remember, curiosity killed the cat. As they want to find out what you are about. The best person to approach is the person working in the front line, as to them the customer is to some extent the adversary, and you as an agent are a fellow soldier meeting the same trials and tribulations. In general, we recommend that you don't rubbish the competition. One's attitude to the competition. In the North American market, for example, an open attitude is more prevalent. Company allegiance is not so strong a factor, and it is also considered that greater market activity will increase the market size, so also increasing demand for one's own product. In this type of environment, the manufacturers of products similar to our own can be a valuable source of information. On the other hand, where competitors jealously protect information, there are often social platforms where contact can be made that eventually leads to collaboration.
Okay, we're close to the end of the lesson. If we haven't done so already, please like and subscribe, and if you have any questions or comments, feel free to add them in the comments section below.
Communications and transport. There are more boundaries in a country than may seem apparent. Along with the geographic frontiers, there are other frontiers less evident, such as states, languages, social strata, ethnic groupings, and so on. However, transport systems, telecommunications, and communications media tend to blur these boundaries from a commercial viewpoint. Conversely, if the communications system is less well developed, this will, to some extent, hamper an exporter's activities, as, consequently, transport is less reliable, and simple things such as sending a fax can be frustrating and at times impossible. From a commercial viewpoint, there is a relationship between the standard of the communications infrastructure and the competition's attitude towards us. In a large country, a convenient airport, as well as a good telephone system, is a decided advantage. Where communications are not ideal, and from an operations viewpoint, a supplier whose market is mainly in the north of the country may not view us as competitors if our market is in the south. In the same way, a customer in the north is more likely to work with their closest supplier in the north, rather than deal with one located in the south and so remote from them. Communications and transport. While up to now we have only dealt with communications in general, we will now examine some specific elements of communicating, including radio, television, and the printed press. Media may be used advantageously at both a local and national level. The dispersion of both television and radio stations is an indication of how the country is sectored. Another valuable piece of information is the index of the number of televisions per household. This gives us an idea of the sales potential of the country. A high level of TV ownership suggests a better informed population, which is more open to different types of news and messages. Both radio and TV are useful in educating the population to the benefits of the product. Personal relationships within the company. Continuing our analysis of personal relationships, one should always be sensitive to the level of insecurity which might be felt by the client's representative with regard to their position in the client's company, and also how secure their relationship is with the rest of the company. If the laws of the country do not protect the individual's job security, the executive being visited, being aware of this, will usually try to be seen to have quick and efficient meetings. In some countries, staff appreciate company flexibility of working hours, especially if punctuality has a high priority within the company, or, again, they are expected to work outside of normal hours without remuneration. To be successful, a salesperson must be flexible with the buyer's time, especially under competitive circumstances. As an example, let us assume we wish to sell product to a large company through its purchasing office. Aware of office politics and the reluctance of people to expose themselves to ridicule, before making a sales presentation, the prudent exporter will bide his time building a relationship with the buyer. He should then choose the right moment to present his product. This should be when the buyer is not stressed by any other problems and is more receptive. This may even involve work outside of office hours.
Given the importance of this subject, we have compiled a series of in-depth resources for your further reference. 1. 7 kinds of people. 2. Effect of culture on marketing. 3. Colors across cultures. 4. Marketing mix and culture. This course includes a number of additional resources, including the examples above. You will be able to access them if you sign up for the full course at the link below. You can find this link also in our description and pinned to the comments below. Discuss this unit. When you sign up for the full certificate course, you will be able to discuss this unit on the forums to clarify any queries or comments you may have.
In this unit, you learned about adapting our marketing approach to different markets. You saw how diversity of culture can influence the outcome of a marketing plan. You outlined key strategies to dealing with new cultures. You became familiar with major theories on the subject, and you highlighted important errors to be avoided when dealing with different cultures.
Thanks for participating in this online video course. The paid version of this program includes more interactive content, supplementary materials for download, forums, an online test, and certificate award. If you would like to achieve this course certificate, then follow the link in the description below or in the pinned comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you would like to binge all 42 course units, here's the link to do so. You'll find it also in the link below.